Howdy everybody, and welcome back to the Mega Man tutorial. Last time we set up the tutorials so that, here let me zoom out. We set up the tutorials so that we can use room boundaries to transition between different rooms, because we want to add one more enemy to the game, and that enemy goes along this corridor right here, and of course we also need to add in the boss as well. So in order to get to those areas, we have to be able to transition between rooms. So let's get cracking on this final enemy. Come over to your enemy objects group and create a new folder, a new group. This will be the dog enemy. This one is a fun one to do. Create a object, obj_dog. And we'll give it a sprite. The dog has several different sprites that are associated with it. Let's see, which one is this? Idle, that's the one I want. This is more just for show, because like the other enemies, we have a spawner that is associated with this as well. So let's create obj_dog_spawner as well. And unlike the other objects, the other spawner objects, which are an invisible object, and we just give it a centered sprite for help in positioning the spawner in the room, the dog spawner works like the Mega Man teleporting sprite. So it actually has a teleporting sprite of its own that we need to use in association with the spawner, because we are going to move the spawner around to simulate the dog teleporting into the room. And last but not least, we'll need to create one more object, obj_dog_breath. Dog breath. Yes. I'm sure internally the NES, the programmers for Mega Man 2 also referred to this as dog breath. Yet they did not. They completely missed out on a very important pun. This is the fire balls that the dogs shoot from their mouth. Alright, 3 objects ready to go. Let's start off with the dog spawner. Now let me pull up the code over here for the spawner. And it's going to copy most of the code from the other spawner objects again. Zoom in here. And we want to start off by giving the spawner a parent spawner, mostly so that it knows what it is, and for if we need to pause. Create and step events need to be added. This will be slightly different from the other spawners because, like I said, we have to move it around a little bit, so it has a couple different extra things going for it. Image_speed is equal to 0. Instance underscore is equal to no one. Start underscore is equal to false. And we don't want it to be visible, but we want it to be visible for the purposes of our well, actually I don't think we need that. Well, because yeah, it's visible when we move it into the room. So we can just turn off. No, wait. If we turn off that, then it won't draw. No, we can do that way. So we can just untick the visible box. But if you feel like it, you can also just write in the code visible is equal to false as well. That's the same thing. And coming over to our step event, we start off with the check to see if we are in the camera view stack. So this is the same camera view code that we have used in the other spawner objects. Once we are in the object's view, though, we have to do a little bit of special code here. So if not start, then start underscore is equal to true, y is equal to obj underscore camera dot y, and visible is equal to true. Main reason why we started off as invisible is so that you don't get a one frame flash of the teleporting object at the starting location before it's moved to this new Y location. So what are we doing here? So if we haven't started the teleporting in animation for the dog, then say that we've started so that we only do this once, then set the Y for the spawner to be equal to object camera.y. That way we're going to put it right here, but when the player moves into the room, then the spawner will recognize that the camera, that it is being activated, and it'll jump up to here so that the dog appears to spawn in from the top of the screen. So we're putting it down there for ease of, right there, for ease of access, just being able to see it easily. And then we're jumping it up to the top of the screen when we actually want to spawn it in. If image underscore speed is equal to 0, then if y is equal to y start, image underscore speed is equal to 0.5. So we have the image speed set to 0 of our dog spawner, and this sprite does have a slight animation and collision box and all that fun stuff, so make sure you got these all in the right positions. If you don't, when the dog object starts at the top of the screen, it will fall down to the ground, at which point it will eventually reach its starting position again. Once it hits its starting position, then it starts animating, and once it finishes animating, it spawns in the actual object dog at that point. So otherwise, y is equal to approach y, excuse me, y start 8. There we go. A little jet lag from my vacation. If animation underscore hit underscore frame 3, or you could put animation end or something like that if you want. If you remember, I've slightly modified my animation. Well, no, I haven't done that on here. So this animation hit frame. I have a animation end script though, which I should be using for these sort of things, but I didn't create the animation end frame script until after I had set up these things. So and instance underscore is equal to no1. So once we hit the end of the animation from this, then spawn our dog. So once our spawner has reached its starting position again and there is no dog instance, then it will spawn in a new dog. instance is equal to, and creates a dog, assigns an instance ID to it for so that it knows what spawner created it, and so on and so forth, just like with the other spawners. More importantly, it also sets itself back to invisible. That way you don't have this sitting around in the stage waiting for something to happen, which never will. Alright, else. If start, so this says if we are in the rectangle, so then we spawn a new object. But if we are not inside of the rectangle, if we're not inside the view, then if start, then visible is equal to true, is equal to x start. These aren't really, well, the x isn't really necessary because it doesn't really, because this spawner doesn't change x position, but I put it in there anyways just to the name, just in case. It's equal to 0, image underscore speed is equal to 0, start underscore is equal to false, and instance underscore is equal to there we go. So when it's not in the room, if we have started, so if it's dropped a dog into the room, then set me back to be reset everything so that we are back to visible equal to true, x equal to x star, y equal to y start. Actually, the visible thing isn't really necessary for it to be true, I think. Yeah, this should be false, actually. Start equal false. So yeah, reset all your variables if we are not inside of the view. So because the player would be in another room at that point. That's everything for the spawner. What do you got? Oh yeah. You're just annoyed because spawner's only referenced once. Let me come over to the dog object real quick. For the dog breath, this one is a real quick and easy setup. So we just go and give it a parent. Oops, that's player objects. Parent objects. Parent enemy projectile. And in the create, h speed is equal to -3.5. This is a simple projectile again, just like the Buster Shot. V speed is equal to 4. Gravity is equal to -0.25. So we just use the built-in variables so that it automatically does its thing according to built-in physics. No need to get complex with it. Alright, that just leaves the dog then. So we're going to add a create event, of course. Let me open up the dog's code if I can find it. Apparently I had it closed somehow. Before we do anything, actually go over to parents, give it parent enemy. Delete this. Now we want to inherit the create event. And we'll start off like with the other enemies. Give it some dog states. The dog will be idle, shooting, or dead. Or dying, I should say. Because the dog actually does a kind of animation when he dies. So rather than instantly killing him, we run through the animation and then destroy him. Though we could actually destroy him and spawn in a dummy object that does the death animation too if we wanted to do it that way. It's your choice. There's no wrong answer. Though actually doing the dummy object would probably be the best in the sense that it is that it would be easier to keep it organized. But doing it all in one object is also kind of nice as well. But so many things going on there. It's hard to actually say anything about it. So one of the good things about the dog is the dog doesn't move, so we don't have to worry about any of the movement setup variables or anything. So we just have animation variables and spawn me a wall with me as I'm a solid enemy. So Mega Man can walk through most enemies in the game, but he can't walk through the dog because the dog is a solid wall. So we need to make sure we create a wall with him that prevents the enemy from walking through him. So image speed equals 0, set up its initial state as idle, animation timer starts off at sec times 0.8, damage at 4, that'd be the damage that the player sustains if he tries to jump into the dog. HP underscore is equal to 10, so he has 10 HP. Wag timer, that's going to be important. Sec times 3. Wagging timer, again, -1, because that's the timer. Fireballs is equal to 0, and spawner underscore is equal to no 1, because we haven't set that. That gets set by the spawner. Alright, and wall underscore is equal to instance create layer, instances, object wall. We actually need to create that object wall, I think. That's in the just over here in the room objects, create obj underscore wall and give it a sprite, just a solid, doesn't really do anything, and parent solid. That's all there is to it. And we give it a image X scale of 4 and a Y scale of 4. That way it's big enough to fill in this entire area. So we'll spawn a wall right here in this square. That'll be 4 tall and 4 wide. Really, we only need 1 wide, but why not make it 4 wide? Doesn't really matter. And yeah, X16, Y minus 64, that's... So the dog, his center of mass is right there. So X minus 16 would be right there. And Y minus 64 would be up here at the top of his sprite. So not right there, it would be spawning right there. Give it a X and a Y like that. Alright. We're going to need to see the images later on too. I did not opt to do a sprite lookup table for this dog, even though I could have, I guess, but you know, me and consistency don't go together very well, right? Alright, so we're going to need over here in the step event a couple of things. We're going to need a damage check, just like we have with the other enemy objects. So state does not equal dog states.death, so we don't take damage when we're dead. So if our underscore ID is equal to instant play object buster shot, so check for buster shots. If the buster shot is found, excuse me, sprite underscore index is equal to sprite underscore dog underscore idle, and play the enemy take damage sound. Why did I set the sprite index equal to sprite dog idle whenever it takes damage? I mean, it could be in the middle of shooting its fire breath, and we don't want to go back to being the idle dog image at that point. I guess I don't really need that in there. I probably had a reason at the time, though, you know how that works. So take away from health and destroy the bullet. And yeah, didn't really take time to figure out the palette on the for the damage flash here. But we'll get into the damage flash palettes when we actually start having the player take damage. So once our HP is less than or equal to 0, animation timer should be equal to sec times 0.8. Mask index is equal to sprite solid. That's the wrong one. We don't want sprite solid. We want sprite underscore. What was the name of that one we used for the sprite false mask? There we go. So the player can't get hit by a dog while he's in the death state, so we don't have to take into account his position. And state equal to dog state dot death. Then of course our state execution as normal. We also have a bit of a animation state down here, so let's actually put in a timer region. So if our wag timer has reached 0, then we set our wag timer back to 1. And if our wagging timer has reached 0, set our wag timer to 3 seconds. And I could have named these better, I guess, but the wagging timer is how long until the dog does a wag, and the wag timer is how long the dog actually wags when he's wagging. If that makes sense, right? Because the dog has, if we go back over to our enemy sprites, dog. So he's normally all idle like this, right? But the dog also has an alternate sprite. So he normally would be like this, but whenever he starts wagging, his tail jumps up and back and down like that for a little bit. So every 3 seconds, for 1 second, his tail will alternate between the 2 frames. And we'll get into that more in the actual events. Actually, well, no, we'll do this in the draw event. Let's throw in the draw event now. If wagging timer is greater than 0 and interval 12 wagging timer. So every 12 frames, we want the, well, yeah, for every 12 frames, we want to swap between sprite index 1 and sprite index 0 of our sprite if wagging timer is greater than 0, e.g. if we are in the wagging time. So wait, I think I had that back. No, wagging timer. Wagging timer. There it is. Wagging timer. Ah! See, that's why I need to name these somewhat different, because it's so easy to get them confused. If wagging timer is equal to 0, then wag timer is 6 times 3. Ah. Anyways, so it works. Other user event 0. Other user event 1. Other user event 2. Alright, we need to set up our states. Idle state. Shoot state. And death state. And back to our idle state. It's all about the animation again. So these are fairly simple. We want to swap this sprite as the timer counts down. So if animation timer mod 7, so the dog does this sort of pawing motion when he's in the idle state, where he lifts his foot up. So bump, bump, like that, and then puts it back down again. So we have this animation timer that runs while we are in the idle state. And we set it up to be 0.8 seconds at the start, right? So every 7 frames, we want it, the animation timer, to change our sprite index based on what our current sprite is. So if we're on idle, then go to Dogfoot 1. If we're on Dogfoot 1, go to Dogfoot 2. If we're on Dogfoot 2, then go back to sprite idle. Alright, that should be good, right? And of course, subtract our animation timer in the meantime. And then once our animation timer is equal to 0, then go into the shoot state and set our sprite index equal to sprite dog breath. Dog breathe fire, I mean. So he opens up his mouth wide there. Okay, so he actually has several different fire patterns, so he can choose several different ones. We have your fairly simple choice of how many fireballs he's going to shoot. It's basically exactly the same as the choice for pickups, drops. So if chance is less than 0.1, then fireballs give him 9, so he has a 10% chance of shooting 9 fireballs. And set him into the animation timer for half a second, for 0.4 seconds, or 0.3 seconds, depending on how many fireballs he's shooting. So that adds up to 100%. And of course, execute the new state. Shoot state. Again, this is all about the animations. So the dog in the shoot state swaps the sprite as the timer counts down. Yes, I did set the animation timer, so we're slowly counting down the animation timer again, and every 4 frames, then create a fireball. So if fireballs is if the amount of fireballs that I can create, which I set back here, so I want 9 fireballs or 6 fireballs or 4 fireballs, then subtract 1 fireball from the fireball and create a fireball here at X19Y12, which is approximately at the mouth of the dog. And once the animation timer has reached 0, and or if the player object has disappeared, e.g. the player has died, then return to the idle state. Set my sprite index back to being idle because I didn't bother with doing a sprite lookup table to bother with the state changing of your sprites. And animation timer is sec times 0.8 because 0.8 seconds is how long you are in the animation in the idle state, and go and start running the idle state. Alright, so those are fairly easy and robust, right? I hope everything's good. So coming back to here, we can go into a death state though. So once we die though, we need to do some other little things. Again, this is draw explosions near me and then drop off a pickup. So we'll comment out this. We'll do pickups next time, I think. Though I might introduce the new weapons too, because we'll need to have new weapons for using with the energy pickups. But no, we don't need that. Maybe we'll do the pickups, then we'll do alternate weapons, and we'll go from there. I think those are pretty important. Alright, so if our animation timer is greater than 0, we set the animation timer to 0.8 here. So as long as the animation timer is greater than 0, every 8 frames create 5 explosions. Technically in the game, the explosions are created at set positions, but I felt like just randomly creating them wherever. So just use a random range here of between the players inside of the hitbox and create single explosion effects. We make 5 of them each time this goes on. This looks really good too once we actually get it all set up. So let's finish this. Instance destroy spawner, because once we kill the dog, the spawner actually is destroyed as well, because we can't kill the dog, then come back to the room and the dog comes back again. He's gone for good once he's actually gone. As opposed to bats and whatnot, which spawn infinitely. Instance underscore destroy wall, so destroy the wall, and of course destroy yourself. And animation timer minus. Alright, so let's give this a try here. Let me make sure I have this in the right position first. According to my information, we are in the right place. So let's give it a try here. Oh yeah, he can't hurt me yet. Pro skills. Darn, I couldn't do it again. Pro skills also involve reproducibility, right? There we go. Look at him wag his tail. Good doggy. And so on and so forth. We want to go back to that wall object that we created. Right scripts wall. Just set invisibility to none. That way we don't see it in the game. And I think we are done for this episode. Thank you everybody for joining me for the Mega Man tutorial. It's time to read some Patreon sponsor names. I'd like to thank Fragile Hearts, Kuru Patreon, Damien, Kenneth Klein, John Dickey, and Vladimir Solotov for your support of the NES GameMaker. It insert special message here from me to you, and thank you everybody else for watching. Remember, if you have a comment or a question, you can leave it in the movie or a comment section, or you can of course join on the Discord and ask your questions there. Thank you everybody once again, and remember, good luck with your programming.